to look at the land and everything, and Brother Billy came and looked at it, and he said he just got such a peace walking over the land. It was just had to be the right spot for our church. And in my wildest imagination, there would be no way that I would have ever dreamed we would have had the kind of facility that we've got here at this church. I don't believe anybody else could have imagined it, and there's no way that we could have done it as individuals. It had to be done with God's blessings and God's grace and His will and His timetable. It's just been turned out to be the more than you could ever dream possible that we could have for our church. And when we put this new building up, it's going to finish up the part of the puzzle that we've all been working for and praying for and striving for when we have that new sanctuary.
Good afternoon, everybody. I had a couple words I'd like to share. So, growing up in the South, I never really saw a real snowfall until I was in high school. But I have so many fond memories of my grandma and grandpa taking me to the sand dunes and playing in the hot sand and getting eaten up by skeeters. My grandpa Jack always had a beaming smile, a piece of gum, and laughter to share. Grandpa has and always will be a true inspiration to me. He was a real hustler, a true hard-working man, a father to so many people. He was always doing the Lord's work and looking after everyone he came in contact with. He made sure his family was well taken care of by constant hard work, fueled by a strong work ethic. When he wasn't working or spending time with us grandkids, he was working with the Lord and walking the righteous path, spreading love and understanding wherever he went. My main story I really wanted to share with everyone is one time I went golfing with my grandpa. We had just finished up a few holes, and we went to visit the Frank Griffin Memorial site that was nearby at the time. When we got near it, a monarch butterfly came and peacefully rested on Papa's calf for about 2 or 3 minutes. And after looking at photos and sharing the special moment with family, we knew it was Frank trying to say hello, and everything was going to be okay. Well, I'm no monarch butterfly, but if Papa was still here, I know he would say everything is going to be all right. Jack Daniel was a saint, an incredible man, and one-of-a-kind grandfather. I couldn't be more blessed to have known him or call him my Papa. Thank you.
Those who don't know me, I grew up in this church. Grew up here as Rod Daniel. I kind of favor Dad just a little bit. Jack Linwood Daniel was born May 29th, 1940, in the bustling metropolis of Patmos, Georgia. Like many at that time, he was born in an old farmhouse, which was the childhood home of his 17-year-old mother. There would be 7 more siblings added over the next 20 years, with the youngest sister, Lynn, being born the year after Jack went off to Berry College. It was a hard life with a tough and demanding father, working other people's land, but with a sweet, amazing mother, always working to keep the peace and keep everyone fed. Dad was driving a tractor at the age most kids are entering preschool, having to physically get up off the seat just to reach the brake or the clutch. Many years, he would start the school year several weeks late, not being allowed to attend until the crops were in. Berry College was his chance out of the farm life, and he took it as soon as he was able. Being dropped off in Rome, Georgia with 2 pair of new jeans and $5 in his pocket, and the full responsibility of success or failure on his 18-year-old shoulders. Berry was a unique school built for kids of humble means, to allow you to work on campus and pay as you went for your education. There were many great things about Berry College, but the absolute best thing at Berry College was Christine Lane. Mom and Dad met there, fell in love, and were soon married with baby Teresa coming along in short order. 2 years of college was all Dad had time for as he started providing for his young and growing family, with Tamara arriving pretty quickly after Teresa. Whoopsie. He hoped that a career at Sears would provide stability and new opportunities, began working there just before Jack Daniel Jr., my brother Jay, came along in 1966. After 6 years at Sears and not getting the mobility he wanted upwardly, he started on with Allstate Insurance, where he stayed for almost 30 years, providing great service to this community and of friends and family. I like to think I was his good luck charm as I came along in 1970, just as his career there began to take off. He even spawned a few other people in their careers at Allstate, as I've been reminded over these last few days, including multiple generations. He did well enough there to educate all of his kids. None of us ever walked out of our school with any school debt, and he was able to retire at the ripe old age of 57, which earned him the right to enjoy 22 years of an active and fun-filled retirement life. What a blessing. Jack loved this church. He and Mom have been faithful members and constant givers of their time and their talent for almost 60 years. He loved the people here, and he only wants this church to grow and flourish and further the kingdom of God to make this world a better place. Jack loved his golf. He loved it almost as much as he loved giving unsolicited golfing advice in the middle of your backswing. He loved his golfing buddies, and 18 holes at least twice a week for decades was never quite enough golf for him. I am more than a little ticked off that I never got to beat him in a round. I figured he would eventually be in a wheelchair and I'd have a fighting chance. He shot a 75 on Thursday. We all knew it. When he broke his age, there was a phone call and a text coming. Hearing him and Frank Griffin tag team the story of winning the year they won the club championship is a great memory. They both giggled like little girls walking us through those final holes. His annual golf trip to Florida with his buddies was a highlight for him every year. I'm so glad I made one of those 47 trips he took to watch him and all these old guys enjoy the game and enjoy each other and let their hair down a little bit. Jack loved his family. He was our father, but for us all, he was without a doubt one of our best friends. He and Mom would not miss an important event in our lives, no matter where or when. With 4 kids, 9 grandkids, 2 great-grandkids, they have made literally hundreds of sporting events, school plays, musical, concerts, graduations, and everything in between. We had vacationed with them, dropped our young kids off with them so we could have a break, and came home to Albany just to relax and recharge and get some good grandparent time in. The last 10 years or so, Dad would find a huge house somewhere in the mountains, big enough to hold the entire family, and rent it for a week. We just got back from doing that about a month ago in Blue Ridge, where the whole family was together, and what a blessing it was to do that. His grandkids adored him as much as we do, and it's been so wonderful to see that in action this week. This family followed Jack's lifelong example, and we circled the wagons, dropped everything, and came here to be with Mom and to be with each other. Jack loved his Christine. 59 years of marriage doesn't come without some bumps in the road, and they had theirs, but you always knew they had each other's backs, and their love was built of trust and respect and had a holy foundation that would never be broken. They were committed to each other, to this church, and to their family, and we all knew it. And last but not least, Jack loved his food. Although he got really serious about diet and exercise these last few years, that man could eat. My daughter said in a moment of trying to lighten up our grieving, well, losing Papa's a real loss for Blackbeards. I wish I knew how many thousands of pounds of catfish and hush puppies that man fried. And the brittle, oh, the brittle. We will never get to settle the great pecan versus peanut brittle debate. He never left Albany to come see a grandkid without bringing his waffle iron, and the kids knew each visit from Papa meant all-you-can-eat waffles every morning. But while Dad loved to eat, it was really about the hospitality. Feeding people and caring for them and making them happy is what drove him. My father was a force of nature, an abundance of energy. That tough life on the farm taught him an amazing work ethic and taught him a love of family and friends and a love of fun. Who here has not had a laugh with Jack Daniel? And who hasn't seen him in some type of servant leader role? It's still so hard to process because Jack was Superman and he was invincible. Brother Billy was preaching once when I was still growing up here and asked in the middle of the service, asked me who my hero was, and I said without hesitation, my dad. He came up to me afterwards, gave me a huge hug, and asked me if I was serious. That was the other great thing about him. He never did anything for the spotlight, just a natural desire to give and bring joy. I knew this day was coming. I thought I was prepared for it, but was I wrong? I really didn't know I could cry this hard. And I mean ugly cry. But this is the natural order of things, and hearing all these endless, wonderful stories of how my dad has touched people's lives really, really has helped. The generosity of spirit of this community and this church, our family and our friends, has been amazing. And we just want to, for the family, I want to thank everybody for all the love and prayers and support and the food. Wow, at the food. Jack definitely would have put on some of that hard-earned weight loss if he were around this week. Thank you all for being a part of my dad's life and for letting him love you as you all have loved him. And thank you, Dad. You have lived a life full, abundant. As the master replied, well done, that good and faithful servant. Well done.
Thank all of you guys for that marvelous eulogy you just gave your dad. No, it really doesn't matter a whole lot what other people say about you. Well, it does. But what matters most is what family says. I was listening to Rod, Jay, and frankly, I'm a little jealous. First of all, I hope I'll have this many people at my funeral. And by the way, may I take the opportunity to invite you to mine. But I'm a little jealous. I hope my children have some of those wonderful things you had to say at your dad. And it reminds me that I probably have a lot of catching up to do. I think the text that the Lord gave me for this service is found in 2 Timothy. Chapter 4, verse 6, though I'll only refer to a portion of that verse. Paul said he's being poured out like an offering. He knows he's dying. That's the idea. And his life had been lived as a pleasant perfume unto the Lord. And then he says, the time of my departure is at hand. That's a very interesting word, but I don't have time for that. And then he said, I have fought the good fight. There are a lot of fights that people get into. There's one most important fight, That is to fight with the faith and for the faith and fight the devil and all that is against us. And then he says, I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. And finally, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all those who love his appearing. You know, there are some people you cannot imagine being without. Rod made reference to that, or Jay. There's some people you think that are always going to be here. They're like a firm foundation upon which you would stand. And I must tell you, Jack was one of those. I could never dream in my wildest imagination that I would be speaking at Jack's funeral. We text last Friday, where he died Saturday. He asked me if I wanted to play golf with him on Saturday. And then, as his custom was, he bragged about, you said 75. We've had a discussion among us. We thought it was 74, but I'm just going to say a 72 to make it sound even better. And that's an incredible thing. I don't know if you've ever played golf. Jack was 79 years old, and to shoot what he shot is absolutely remarkable. And so he is telling me about that. And I said, Jack, you've been playing too much golf. Christine told him that a lot of times, I think. And then he said, well, I haven't played in 2 weeks. See, that's another backhanded brag. Did I tell you sometime he would brag about his game? Well, and I told him, I said, well, I'm jealous, and I am, because I could never do all the things he told me to do when we were playing. And he would give you unsolicited advice. And so I didn't. But so what can I say today that hasn't already been said? What can I say today about my friend, your friend? See, Jack had an unusual ability. He had an unusual ability, much like Michael Guido, who was sort of a legend in Georgia with TV years ago. He had an unusual ability to make you think. I mean, it wasn't conniving, but you just felt, I'm the best friend he has. And then you learn that everyone else feels like it. That's a marvelous gift. I am also envious of that. But it is interesting to listen and read what others have said about Jack. In fact, as you listen, you get a profile. That is dead on the money. You'll hear people talk about his faith, his faithfulness, his friendships, his fun times, and his love for his family, his church. Let me illustrate with excerpts from some comments that those who knew him in a little different setting other than family and other than church. Well, I like what the kids penned in his obituary. It is a summary of Jack Daniel. It said, Jack led, loved, and served his family, friends, church, and community with great joy and wisdom, and he is leaving behind a wonderful legacy. We don't use that word very often. Legacy. Oh, we're going to all leave one. But I want to leave one like Jack left. To have my son and my daughter and my friends get up and say these things about me and look over my life and say, I left a legacy. That ought to be challenging to all of us. He's leaving behind a wonderful legacy, and he'll be deeply missed by all those who knew him. I went on the tribute wall. That's a good thing that Matthews has. Gives people who perhaps will not be able to come an opportunity to make a statement about Jack. And one of those says, all was positive. How about Jack? I said, now I know him. And Jack had a few warts. Now, I'm telling you. But then I considered the source. It was Tim Jordan who wrote that. And he was good for exaggerating some things, but it went on. It's a very good statement, or I would not read it. He said, all was positive about Jack, especially when it comes to his family. Nobody valued his family more than Jack Daniel did. And then he said, Jack was a man of uncommon integrity. That's so true. And he had the wisdom to complement it. Alan Broom wrote, Jack was my friend. He was a great husband and father. And more than anything else, Jack was a man of God. And I thought this was rather artistic. He said his testimony was painted in his trail that he left of a wonderful service to the Lord. Al Sinkveld said, Jack was so good-natured and loved the kidding that we all dished out. And he would send it right back to you. Each year after his Daytona trip, when I would see him, I'd jokingly say to him, can I have my money back? And his reply was always the same, sure. We'll apply it to the next year's trip. And then he'd laugh and go on. We're blessed, Al says, to have had such a friendship we had with Jack. When I think of Jack, Bobby Tripp wrote, I think of a big man with a big heart. I like that. A big man with a big heart. He loved golf. He loved the guys in our group. And I will always think of him and the good times we had at Daytona in the Jack Daniel Open. I did not know they called it that, which we plan to continue in his memory. Jerry Morgan, a good friend, also said, I'll miss my friend Jack. We had many conversations about our faith and our families over the years. As said by others, our trip was a highlight of our year. We all look forward to the trip and getting to spend time together. Because Jack, listen to this, because Jack lived his faith every day on the golf course, I know he is in heaven today. Isn't that good? When I think of Jack, Jerry Griffin said, when I think of Jack, I see a man dedicated to his faith, family, and friends. I think of times he played with his good friend, Frank Griffin, Larry Wilson, and Donald Lee. Now they have a foursome. I might have to do a little more theological study to see if there are going to be golf courses in heaven. I figured out there couldn't be because somebody's got to lose. Can't be a loser in heaven. And Jack had and lived a good life. His life ended doing something he loved. We all hope we'll be so lucky. And there's assurance that we will join him with our Lord and Savior. Now, I saved his buddy and one of my big buddies, Jackie Morris's, for last. Now, Jackie is not as spiritual as these guys are. And Jackie and Jack and I and George and it used to be Donald, we'd play on Monday at River Point. And so we all played together and grew to love one another. But Jackie, who also worked with him, and he's a member of our church, by the way, a good man, Jackie said, Jack exercised every morning and lost a lot of weight. And by the way, he would come out and he'd say, well, I exercised this morning at 5 o'clock. We wanted to say, Jack, we do not care. But he said, and then he got on that South Beach diet. I don't know if it's South Beach diet or the Miami diet. He would not eat donuts that we had at work. So I told him, I tell you what, Jack, you exercise for me and I'll eat the donuts for you. And then he says, I loved him like a brother. And I believe that, as many of us did. You get the point. Jack was a lifelong sports fan. He played and coached church softball over the years. He coached his sons. He was a big fan of the Braves, the Falcons, and the Bulldogs. Jack did love sports, and particularly golf. He loved his family and church. Since 1978, when the church decided to build and eventually relocate, we had, and I came here in '85, and still going on, we had many committees and programs to raise money to build, and Jack was probably in each one of those meetings. I suspect there was over 1,000 meetings. That is not an exaggeration. He loved his family, as Jay and Rod mentioned. One day, we had played golf at River Point. We finished up the front nine, came back, we always got a sandwich, and we're talking. And we were talking about spending money on your children. And he said this. He said, Christine and I made a conscientious decision years ago that we would not complain about spending money on our kids because we wanted to enjoy them while we could. Is that good? I'm telling you, he loved his family, obviously. He loved his friends, and particularly, I would point out he loved Joseph and Roy Uchula, who are from India, and they've almost adopted them. In fact, Jack and Christine went to India to visit with their families. Now, it is evident that Jack loved golf. And so I'd like to synthesize all of these things that we have discussed with a little life lesson about golf. Now, I do agree with the greatest amateur of all times, Bobby Jones, and he said, golf is the closest game to the game we call life. You can get bad breaks from good shots, and you get good breaks from bad shots. But you always have to play the ball where it lies. And that's good. And he goes on to say something. Now, I know some of you may misunderstand and think I'm not a Bible preacher. But I would remind you, before I get into my little homily about Jack Goff and the Christian life, I would remind you that when you read particularly the Apostle Paul, he talks about sports a lot. In my text, he talks about running the race. He talks about fighting the good fight. He talks about boxing and probably other things. So I don't think that I'm too much off center by making a comparison. First of all, with golf, like life, or the Christian life, there has to be a beginning. Believe it or not, Jack was not born with a golf club in his hand. One day he had to start deliberately and make a decision that I'm going to play golf. By the way, I remember when Jack was not nearly as good as he has been the last few years. In fact, I remember, well, I'll tell that later. But you're not born a Christian. You're not born a Christian. We come in this world, you can be baptized, you can be christened as a baby, but that will not save your soul. The reason Baptists, the difference between Baptists and others is we believe in believer's baptism. We firmly believe that the Bible teaches that one has to make a personal decision to follow the Lord Jesus Christ. And he has to follow that with baptism as a symbol that he has died and been buried and rose again with Christ. One must make a deliberate decision to trust Jesus Christ